So welcome everybody to the Help Your End Users Do More with Crystal Reports webinar. My name is Stephanie Huber and I'm a Senior Business Intelligence Consultant with Consultancy by Kingfisher. I'm also the newest advisor on the Business Objects Expert site. So in today's webinar, we'll briefly review Crystal Reports and its core functionality. Then through the process of building a customer orders report, I will review various ways to add end user interactivity. Once we build our interactive report, Scott Wallace from Business Objects Expert site will join me to go over the Business Objects Expert site, which is a site that contains rich business objects related content for both developers and business users. And time permitting, I'll conclude the webinar with questions and answers from the attendees. And also I'll provide my contact information as well as Scott's contact information so you can email me any follow-up questions that you may have. Okay, so to give you a brief background on or to give you more information on my background, I am a Crystal Report and SAP Dashboard developer with Consultancy by Kingfisher. My company is headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we are SAP Gold Partners, SAP Business Objects Beta Testers. We are SAP Insider Speakers, and we've been delivering end-to-end Crystal Reports and dashboard solutions for over 15 years. Okay, so what is Crystal Reports? Crystal Reports is a development technology that is used to produce highly formatted, pixel-perfect reports. They're typically pushed out to end users and consumed via PDF. However, Crystal Reports has the ability to be highly interactive with the end users. So what do I mean by this interactivity? We're talking about interactivity that lets the end user decide how to group the report data, format the report data, sort the report data. That means that the report groups, formats, and sorts are not static, but dynamic and driven by the end user. So instead of meeting report requirements with different reports, I'm going to teach you how to create a single RPT file that lets the end user group, format, and sort the data. Okay, so what's the value in this? There are really two ways. First, that less reports means less objects published to the Business Objects repository, which means less objects to maintain and it's less overhead on the server. Secondly is user adoption. So, we as companies, we spend all this money procuring software licenses, hiring talent to develop reports, and actually developing the reports. And we want to leverage our investment by ensuring user adoption. And one of the most effective way to ensure user adoption is to give the end users the power and the ability to slice and dice the data in a way that's relevant to them. Now, because report performance is directly correlated with the business logic and the functionality that the RPT file contains, it's absolutely critical that we developers follow report design best practices when building our reports. So I've created a report design best practices document which is available for download on the Kingfisher website and the Business Objects website. And I will provide the places for you to go after the webinar is over so you can download that information. And then also, so you know, all of the steps that we're about to take in building our interactive customer orders report, they're documented in a PDF which will also be available for download on the Kingfisher website and the Business Objects Expert website. So that being said, we will start developing our report. Okay, so this is Crystal Reports 2011. So Crystal Reports, as we know, Business Objects has come out with a new release of its software, Business Objects 4.0. In the new release in Business Objects 4.0, Crystal comes in two flavors. The legacy version, which is Crystal Reports 2011, and the new version, Crystal Reports for Enterprise. For the purpose of this demo, we will use the legacy version of Crystal. So you are looking at Crystal Reports 2011. Okay? And just so you know, there's always two ways to do things in Crystal. You can use these toolbars here, or you can go through the File menu. So we'll start with building our report. So we'll start with this File menu here. We're going to go to File, New, Blank Report. So let's talk about this report requirement. Okay, so we're building a customer orders report. Why did I pick that? Because that transcends across all industries. We all have customers, and we all are at some sort of products or some sort of service that we deliver. So to kind of add some context around this report, I have a customer orders report request from the marketing department. They want to see all of the customer orders, and they want to see it broken down by country so they know where to invest their marketing dollars. So exactly where are most of my orders being concentrated, which countries. So those are our report requirements that have come from the marketing department. So as with any development technology, you start with the data source. So let's look at the data source here. You have my existing connections here, or you can create a new connection to a new data source. So I'm going to access an ODBC connection to the Extreme Bicycle database. So when you purchase Crystal Reports 2008 or Crystal Reports 2011, you will have available to you an Access database that contains, it's just a simple relational database that comes with the purchase of Crystal Reports. So I've created an ODBC connection to that data source, and that's what we will use for our demo. So if I expand this ODBC folder here, I've got a listing of all of the data sources that I've created ODBC connections to. So if I scroll down, I'm going to see this Extreme Bicycle database. If I click Next, I will be prompted to enter any credentials, a user ID and password. This is an unsecured Microsoft Access database, so I'm just going to click Finish. Now I have right here available to me all of the tables, views, and stored procedures that come with the Extreme Access database. And also here, this is the ability if you ever wanted to add a command object or a SQL statement on that data source, you can do it here. But I will be dealing with the raw tables. So I'm going to expand this tables area here. Now again, this is a customer orders report. So I will need the customer table, and I will need the orders table. And you can see once I've selected two tables from the available data sources to the selected tables, once I have two or more available, I have this Links tab enabled. So if I go over here to the Links tab, I can join my two tables together. So you can see Crystal Reports does a good job about labeling all the indexes. So you see our first index, our second index, our third index. So we'll have to join these two tables together. So I'm going to join these two tables on customer ID. So all I have to do is select the customer ID field, drag and drop on the customer ID field here. Now that I've established my connection, by default it'll use an inner join. So what that means is, we're talking relational database concepts here. That means that the record has to exist in both the customer table and the orders table in order for it to be returned in the report. So if the record does not exist in both tables, it will not be returned in the report. However, if you wanted to change it to an outer join, that's absolutely available to you by selecting the join, right-clicking, going to link options, and then changing it there. And then one other important thing I want to note is if you go back to this data source, I'm connected to this Extreme database, but Crystal Reports can support multiple data sources in a single report. So I can connect to this Extreme Microsoft Access database, and I can connect to my SQL server. I can connect to a standalone Excel file. I can connect to SAP ECC tables or SAP BW. So a single Crystal report can have multiple data sources. So that's just something that a lot of people, just an important note to remember. So if I click OK, here we are in the design mode of the report. Okay, so this is our customer orders report. So what kind of fields do my end users want to see? So if I click this Field Explorer here, I'll basically have all of my database fields that are available to me here. So if I expand this database fields here, I see I've brought in my customer table and my orders table. So if I expand this customer table here, I'll see all of the fields in that customer table. So I can select customer name and drag and drop in the detail section. Mind you, placement of the object in the section determines basically how many records are being returned in the report. Because I placed that object in the detail section, that means every single record in the database will be returned, 269 distinct customer names. But if I were to place it in any other section, that number would change. So if I place it in the report header section, only the first record in the database will be returned. And likewise, if I put it in the report footer section, only the last record in the database will be returned. So let's go back to adding our fields to the report. So I've got customer name. I want to see order ID. I want to see the order ID that customer made. You can expand the field here. I want to see the order date. What was the date that customer placed the order? And then lastly, I want to see the order amount. So how much was this order for? So we can expand this here. Okay, so if I go to preview the report here, I can see I have 2,191 records. So very rarely do we just want a flat file of data. So what we want to do is group the data. We want to logically organize the data. So there's two reasons you would create a group. Number one, because it helps us organize the data. And number two, we can get subtotals at a group level. So instead of seeing orders, the total amount of all orders for the whole company, I want to see orders by country. Because I want to figure out, this is from my marketing department, where should I invest those marketing dollars? What countries are using bicycles? Is it Asia? Is it North America? Is it South America? So we will add a report group. So to add a report group, we'll use the File menu, go to Report, Group Expert, and then you can see Crystal Reports is good because you can see these are the 4 fields that we have in the Canvas already. Crystal Reports will put those 4 fields at the very top so you can easily select them. But if you want to group on a field that isn't already in the report, you can just expand from the existing tables. So we're going to group on country. So we have country here, and if I click OK, I've got my country field here. So now I have everything grouped by country. So again, one of the main reasons it helps us organize the report, and then also we want to see some subtotals by country. So let's start adding subtotals. So to add a subtotal, you would select the field that you want to total. So I'm going to select order amount. If I right-click order amount from the shortcut menu, I'm going to see this insert option. So if I insert a summary, I have this dialog box here. So what field do I want to summarize? I want to summarize the order amount. What kind of summary do I want to have? By default, it'll use sum, but I have all kinds of summary types available to me. Everything from standard deviation to distinct count. So, and for average, weighted average. But for this, I'm going to leave the default sum. And then how do I want to summarize this? Do I want to summarize this for the entire report, or do I want to summarize it at the group level for each country? I'm going to select this Add to All Group Levels option, and it will add 2 summaries for me. One for each country group and one for the entire data set, the entire report. I click OK, and it added it there. And so now that I have my totals by country, I want to get a count. So exactly how many orders? Are we dealing with a lot of little orders or just a couple of large customers that make large purchases? So let's add the count of orders. So again, we would select the order ID field, right-click, from the shortcut menu, insert, and select summary. And again, this is the field we want to sum, but this time I'm going to change the summary type. So I'm going to change the summary type from sum to count. And again, my summary location, I'm going to add it to all group levels. So I'm going to check this Add to All Group Levels option here and click OK. So for this point, we have all of the data that we want. We have it grouped by country, and we have subtotals. So at this point, we will simply format the report. We're really going to leverage what Crystal Reports is known for, that formatting, that pixel-perfect formatting. And something that I want to note is that it is so critical, and this will save your developers time. You need, before you start any reporting initiative, you should establish corporate formatting standards. That way, whenever you develop and release these reports, it's not an iterative process. Ooh, move the logo to the middle, move it to the left. Include a report title that's 18 size font. No, make it 24. Establish those standards up front, create a report template, and apply that template. That way, it just drastically reduces the development time for building and deploying these reports. So in this case, and it's very simple to create a template. We could do a separate webinar on that, but just so you know, there's existing templates available to you through the Template Expert. But you can see all of these templates come with Crystal Reports, but you can create your own so that it meets your corporate formatting standards. So with most Crystal reports, we're going to want to include a logo. So I'm going to insert a picture. And this supports bitmaps, JPEGs, a lot of different image files. And just note, wherever my upper left corner, do you see the upper left corner? Whichever section that upper left corner exists in, that's where it will place the object. And note that the section will grow to accommodate that object. So if I drop it in the report header section, it grows. And we can decrease this size a little bit since it looks a little large. It's very simple. Just the way we right-clicked and inserted a summary, I'm going to right-click and format the graphic. And you can see in the format editor, there's always several tabs. There's the common tab, and there's all the tabs that are relevant to that particular item. Because this is a picture, I'm going to go to the picture tab, and I'm going to reduce it to, say, 75%. Click OK. So now it reduced it to where it'll accommodate the report better. So now we're going to make the header stand out a bit, the group header. We're going to make this a size, say, 14 font. We're going to add some color, so we're going to make this header section silver. So if I right-click and go to Section Expert, you can see I've got my color tab here. I can just click it and enable that silver. And then I'll also make these subtotals a little larger too. I can make them, say, 11. Make them line up here. And just note, there's several ways to multi-select objects. I can hold down my control button and select them this way, or I can lasso them. I mean, there's several ways. But you can format multiple objects at the same time. So typically, if this is any kind of summary, we're going to add a line above it so it looks like it's a calculation. So I'm going to right-click and format objects. And again, here's the format editor. And this time we're going to go to the border tab because I'm going to add a top line because that'll indicate that it's a calculation. So I can do the top, and I'm going to select double. And you can see down below there's the sample of what your formatted field would look like. So I'm going to click OK. Now the last thing to add here, so this is what my report looks like right now. The last thing that I'm going to add is a report title. So there's two ways to add a report title. One way that you don't want to do, but you can do, but I want to show you best practice here. Obviously, you can add a text field and just type, customer orders report. But what we're going to do is use a special field. So again, in the Field Explorer, where we went to access the database fields that we brought into the report, there's something called special fields. Now, these special fields contain pre-built or predefined functions in Crystal. So if I look down here, I can see my report title and drag and drop here. And if I make this, say, 18 font, I'm going to bold it, underline it, center it. Now if I go to preview, it doesn't display anything. That report title information is kept in the summary information. So it is best practice before you publish a report to business objects that you always include summary information. Where do I add the summary information? You go to File, Summary Info right here. So it's always, so we can put our author, so I'm Stephanie Huber, and you can put in comments here. So the reason this is important to kind of add this in is because just so you know, when you publish this Crystal report to business objects, all of these fields are searchable in business objects. So if I have a large folder structure with lots of published reports and I'm looking for a particular report, I can search this comments field. I can search this title field. So I'll call it Customer Orders Report. Click OK. So I've got my customer orders report. Go ahead and save this. Okay. So I have my customer orders report. Okay. So we've deployed this. The users love it. Everybody's excited. But now that this data is out there, we have another request for, say, HR. And they say, okay, well, we want to see the same information. We want to see order information. But I don't want to see it by the country because I'm not looking to figure out where to invest my sales dollars. We're changing to a performance compensation model. So I want to see orders by the employee who made the sale. So basically our report requirement, we've got an enhancement request to this report. So as you know, this report group is static. It's based on, if we go to the group expert, it's based on country. However, I can make this dynamic and let the end user determine how to group the report. So the first thing is, okay, we need to add in employee information. So the first thing we're going to do is go back to the data source and add employee information. So you can go to this little database icon here, this golden cylinder, and it'll take you back to the database expert where we originally were, where we brought in these two tables. So again, I'm going to expand this ODBC connection. You can see that that plug indicates I have a current connection to the Extreme database. If I expand that, I'm going to see my tables again, my views, my stored procedures. If I expand the tables, let me add employee here. So I can move it over here, and then again, I need to join my table. So if I go to links, and I bring this table in here, you can see the third index here is the first index in this table. So to join these tables, I will just drag and drop right here, and then they're joined. So it says, do you want to refresh report data? I'm going to click OK. Okay, perfect. So now I still have 2,191 records. Okay, so let's talk about how do I make this interactive? How can I let the user tell me how to group this report data? So one of the main ways that Crystal Reports communicates to the end user is through a parameter. So the way we typically think of parameters, we use parameters to filter the data set. I mean, this is just an extreme access database that doesn't contain a lot of records, so we've only got 2,191 records. But in a real live production system on a client site, your database can have literally millions of records. Hardly ever do you want to return every single record from the database. So that's why we use parameters to filter the data set. Do we want to run it for a particular country? Do we want to run it for a particular date range? So that's how we typically think of parameters. We use them to filter the data set. Well, parameters are used to communicate to the end user. Therefore, we can use parameters to dynamically change the report group because that's how Crystal Reports interfaces with the end user. So let's create a parameter. So to create a parameter, you would just go to the Field Explorer, and this is where we would go for our special fields. This is where we would go to access all of the data and the tables that we brought into the report. So to create a parameter is very simple. You would select the parameter fields here, and you would right-click and go to New. Okay, so here's our parameter screen dialog box. So remember, the purpose is we want to create a parameter because we want the end user to tell us how to group the report data. So I'm just going to call this something intuitive. I'm going to call it report group. Now you can see the parameter type defaults to a string. I'm going to leave that as a string. Now there's the type, list of values. So if we think of a parameter, there's two types of parameters. There's dynamic and static. So dynamic is just that. A dynamic parameter will return a distinct list of values from your database. A static parameter will only return a static list of values. So as the data in the database changes, this static list of values will not change. Okay? So there's two things you can do with a static parameter. I can import a one-time list from the database, or I can create my own custom values, which is what I'm going to do for this example. So my first parameter option, I'm going to make country, because I can group my report by A, country, or I want to group my report by B, employee. So I'm going to have two options available in my static parameter. So let's scroll down here. So I only need these two. So let's scroll down here and look at these options. Am I going to make this parameter optional? I will make it required, so I'm going to leave that false. It says allow custom values true. I'm going to change this to false because I don't want the end user to type a custom value. I want to force the end user to pick either country or employee. So those are all the additional changes that I need to make, so I'm going to click OK. So you can see I've created my report group parameter, but it doesn't have that green check mark next to it, meaning it's not been used anywhere in the report. So what I'm going to do, the second step that I'm going to do is create a formula that references this parameter. and our group will be based on that formula, okay? So here we do. The process of creating a formula is exactly the same. I'm going to select my formula fields. I'm going to right-click, select New. I'm going to call this something intuitive again. We'll call it Report Group. Click OK. OK. So just like when we created our report group, you can see all of the fields that currently exist in the report are available up top. Now, just so you know, there's two types of formulas you can write in Crystal Reports. The first one is an if-then-else formula. If this condition, then value, else value. The second type of formula is a Boolean formula, meaning true and false. It will either return a true or false. So in this case, I'm going to write an if-then-else formula. So we have if report group. So this is my parameter. So if I have if my report group equals, and what did we say? One of our options was country. So if the user selects country from the parameter, then I'm going to return the database field country. Else, if the report group equals employee, then I'm going to return employee ID. Now, just so you know, whenever you save a formula, you should always parse it out. So, and this is similar with most programming languages, SQL for instance. If you have an if-then-else formula or a case statement, it needs to either return two string fields, two number fields, but it can't return a string or a number. So if I parse this out, it'll say a string is required here. So let me wrap this employee ID field with a toText function. That way it will return a country, which is a text field, or the employee ID, which I'm making a text field. So that way they're similar fields. So if I parse this again, I have no errors. Click OK. So now I have my formula, my report group formula. So now we're ready. So we created our parameter that's going to prompt the user either select country or employee, and then we have a formula. If the user selects country, return the database field country. If the user selects employee, return the database field employee. This formula is what we're going to use to group the report. So if I go to my group expert, and again, you can use the toolbar or the file menu. So if I go to my group expert here, I'm going to change this static group, this static country group, I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to group it based on this formula. So if I move this over here and click OK, so now I have an option. I can group this by country or employee. So if I select country again, I have my countries. And if I select employees, it'll be grouped by employee ID. Now this brings up a very good point. Do you see how we grouped it on employee ID, which are numbers? So if we look at, for instance, let's find like 4, 1, these are all database fields. So first of all, let's talk best practice. You always want to group on an ID field. Why? Why don't I want to group on the name? Because there could be 2 John Smiths in your company. There could be 2 Ashley Smiths in your company. So what's unique is the ID field. However, the end user doesn't know who employee ID 4 is. We don't know who 1 is. So we want to see the name. It's very, very simple way to display the name. So we're going to go back to our group expert. So again, from the report menu, we go to group expert. If I select this group here and I go to options, I have this dialog box here. So the common tab shows me the order. Do I want it in ascending order? But if I go to this options tab, I have the ability to customize the group name field. So if I enable that checkbox, there's 2 things. I can basically base that group name on another field, for instance, employee last name, or I can have a formula display the group name. So that's what I'm going to use. And just so you know, anytime you see this X+2 with a pencil, that takes you to the formula workshop. And that formula workshop allows you to make things dynamic. So you don't have to pick a static customer name field, you can make it dynamic, which is what we're going to do. So use a formula for the group name, because I don't want to see a 1, I don't want to see a 4, I want to see the name. So we'll say if this report group, meaning if that's our formula, if that's numeric, meaning they selected employee and it's returning numbers, if that's numeric, then what do I want to see? Say we want to see the first initial and the last name, or the first name and the last name. So I would go to the employee, because we added the employee table. I will say first name. I'm going to add a space and last name, else return country. So let's think about this formula. Let's make sure everybody's on track. If our report group is numeric, meaning if they selected ID, I want to display the first name and the last name for the group name. Don't show me the ID, show me the first and the last name. If it's not numeric, meaning they selected the country, display the country. So let me parse this out. No errors. Click Save and Close. Click OK. Click OK. Now I have basically I have the employee's first and last name. So let's try to toggle through some more employees here. Margaret Peacock, Nancy. We have all of the meaningful business names. And again, we can add our formatting back in. So you can see by now the end user can decide exactly how to group this data. So we have all of Nancy's accounts. So if I refresh this report and I want to view it by, say, country, I can view my data by country. If I want to go back and view the data again by employees, just refresh the report, prompt for new parameter values. If I click OK, I'm going to select it to employee, and I'll have my employees here. So you can see, so what this has done is I have a single RPT file, but I've met requirements from 2 completely different departments. And I'm letting the end user determine how to group the report data. Okay? So we'll go over one other main thing that Crystal Reports is made for, formatting. So obviously, this is a lot of information. If I scroll down to the end of this report, that's 36 pages. That's a lot of data. So say that I work in finance and I am looking at this report and I like it grouped by country. But I want to highlight, I want to follow up on all the invoices that are greater than, say, $10,000 because I want to follow up on them. I want to make sure that they were delivered on time. I want to make sure that the customer is paying on time. I want to follow up on those invoices. So I want to highlight the invoices greater than a certain dollar amount. So typically the way we would do this, again, if you select the field, so say I want to format this field in particular, the order amount field. If I select this field here and I right-click, from the shortcut menu, instead of going to Insert where we inserted the summary, I'm going to go up here to where it says Format Field. Format Field. So again, we have our Common tab, we have the border, we have the Font tab. Say I want to add a drop shadow, and you can see what it's going to look like, to all the invoices that are greater than $10,000. So if I click this X+2, I can add a condition. Because if I just leave this here, it's going to add a drop shadow to every single field. Or I can add a drop shadow if and only if certain conditions are met. So let me put that in by clicking this X+2, which takes me again to the formula workshop. So let's start here. So we say if order amount is greater than 10,000. Actually, this isn't. Remember how we said there's 2 types of formulas? There's 2 types of formulas. There's an if then else formula, which returns a value if a condition is true, else another condition. The second type of formula is a Boolean, a true false. All I need is a Boolean statement here. Either this is true or this is false. If it's true, it's going to add a drop shadow. If it's false, it will not add a drop shadow. Let me parse this out. I'm going to click OK. Click Save and Close. And you can see I have some logic here. So if I click OK and go to Preview, I can easily see which invoices are greater than $10,000. It's easy for me to pull those out and view those in the report. But what happens if, because this happens, sometimes our largest deals are closed at the end of the quarter. So if I'm viewing this report at the beginning of the quarter and I know a lot of my larger deals aren't closed, I might want to only view invoices greater than $5,000. So right now this is static. This is hard-coded to $10,000. But I want the end user to decide, do you want to view invoices greater than $5,000, then $10,000, then $20,000? I want the end user to decide. Again, how does Crystal Reports communicate to the end user? Through parameters. So let's create a parameter. And that parameter will be used to determine what the threshold is for this drop shadow. So again, we go to the Field Explorer, and I select my parameter fields here, and I right-click, and I go to New, and we'll name this something logical. We'll say highlight invoices greater than. Now, instead of leaving this as a string, I'm going to change this to a number, because this parameter field, they're going to type in 10,000. They're going to type in 5. They're going to type in 50,000. And I'm going to leave this static. And so am I going to make this optional? I'm going to make it required, and it says allow custom values. I'm going to make this true. So they have to put in a value. So if I click OK, you can see there's no green check mark here, so it's not being used anywhere in the report. So for me to use this parameter in the report, I would go back to the design mode, select the field that I'm formatting, right-click like I would before, go to Format Field from the shortcut menu. This is my Format Editor dialog box. Let's go back to that drop shadow setting, which is under the Border tab. So I can see here's my drop shadow here. So if I click this to take me to the Formula Workshop, instead of making this dynamic, or I'm sorry, static for 10,000, I can make it dynamic with this parameter. Highlight invoices where, or add a drop shadow where invoices have an order amount greater than this parameter value. Let me parse it out. Click Save and Close. So now highlight invoices greater than, let's pick 5,000. So now I have all my invoices greater than 5,000. If I refresh this report and I go to Prompt for New Parameter Values, if I select that option and click OK, so I can change this to say 14,000. So now it's only going to highlight the invoices greater than 14,000. I'm letting my end user determine how to group the data, determine how to format the data. And this can be used, and mind you, parameters were typically designed to help us filter the result set, but in this case, in both cases, we haven't even touched the record selection. We're using parameters to just communicate with the user to tell us how to change and slice and dice and format the report. So we are at 140. So I have several other things outlined in that PowerPoint document that you guys can download from the Kingfisher website and the Business Objects website. But I want to turn it over to Scott Wallace, who can go over kind of Crystal Reports and other business objects related content.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's a very good presentation, and we haven't had that much of a chance on Business Objects Expert to do some of these online demos. This is really a great session that I'm really enjoying watching so far. As the editor of Business Objects Expert, I just want to take a quick moment to show those of you who have not been on this site, just kind of give you a quick tour of the site, and then we can get back to Stephanie to wrap it up. I'm on this site every day, whether I'm directly posting articles or writing new content myself or helping some authors with their drafts, and we really want this site to be a one-stop resource for front-end users and administrators who need info about the kind of the traditional business objects BI tools such as Excel CS dashboards or Webby or Crystal Reports. And our big goal is to help subscribers save time and become more successful in just performing their everyday business objects activities. And for me, at least, part of that goal is that we present our content from a platform-independent perspective. I know a lot of our users are NetWeaver BW folks, kind of integrating business objects, and then we have a fair amount of users who are not running SAP as a SAP system, but are using business objects kind of on its own. And on this website at least, you don't need to be running an SAP system to enjoy the features and the content of the website. We write it from a platform independent perspective where people can take the information and use it, and I think we found that to be an important feature for a lot of people who have subscribed. As you can see, just even looking at the site, there are a lot of different ways to get into content here, whether it's through looking through our topics along the top navigation or checking through some of the specific BI tools along the left, and even further down you can see we divide it by types of content, whether it's blogs or e-tips or articles. And I'm going to just Stephanie click the articles link there just to kind of show you what some of our articles are, because this really is the core in a lot of ways of the site, because this is where we have a lot of our technical expertise come into play here. This content that you see before you hear these articles, it's all peer-reviewed, and what I mean by peer-reviewed is that an author submits an abstract to us and then a draft article to us, and we have one of our editorial technical advisors review that draft. They're looking for technical accuracy and objectiveness and relevance to the topic. And as Stephanie noted when she started, she is our newest editorial advisor, and we have some, I know there's a link somewhere along the left there too. We can take a look quickly at the other advisors. We have a great group of technical experts guiding this coverage, and all of our articles are also reviewed by a team of professional editors. So I can say pretty confidently to our subscribers and visitors that they'll get trustworthy information and best practices when they come to the site. So if you haven't been on the site yet, I hope you'll come and check us out after this program is over, and we'd love to have you join us as a subscriber as well, so that you can see kind of firsthand how helpful the information is. And with that brief tour, Stephanie, I'll send the show back over to you so you can wrap up whatever. I know you've got a few more things to talk about, I think.
Okay.
So thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We have, so first of all, I want to ensure that everybody has our contact information available. And again, every step that we took, plus more, is available for download on the Business Objects and Business Objects Expert site and the Kingfisher Inc. website. But if, let me pull up our contact information here. So we have, so you can contact me at stephanie.huber@kingfisherinc.com, and then you can follow me on Twitter at shuber1. And then note that I will be speaking at the Business Objects User Conference in Orlando in September, and also the SAP Insider Reporting and Analytics Show in Las Vegas in late October. If you'd like to contact Scott Wallace regarding the Business Objects Expert site, getting involved, becoming a paying subscriber, you can email him at scott.wallace@wizpubs.com. And then at this time, if you guys have any questions, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. This was a 45-minute webinar, which we're finishing precisely at that time. But if anybody wants to stay on and ask me additional questions, we can certainly do that.
Let me take a look, Stephanie, and see if we have anyone who's actually live on the phone. I know we have some questions in our question box here that I can probably read. Let me just make sure we have anyone. We do have someone who may be on the line. Let me just unmute him and see if he's still there. It's I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the first name. It's Raghavendra. Raghavendra, are you still on the line right now? I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Or maybe we can look at questions in the chat.
Hi, Raghavendra, are you there? Yeah, we may have to look on the question. Yeah, he may not be there.
So if we start
Can you see the question? Yeah, you can see the question. I just wanted to make sure you could actually see the question, Stephanie.
I can. Let me see. It's kind of difficult because I'm navigating inside of a little box. But if you have easier access to read them, do you want to read them out loud to me? And then I can.
Okay, here's a question. I'm guessing we'll probably not get to all these, but if there is a question that we don't get to, we can definitely pass them over to you, Stephanie, after. Here's one, though, from Mark Reyes. You mentioned that we can use multiple data sources in one report. Can we link the data, and how will the report treat the data in a display?
Yes, you can absolutely link the report data. So as we brought in the customer table, the orders table, the employee tables, and we joined those tables on similar fields, you would also do that when you bring in tables from multiple data sources. So Crystal doesn't care. For instance, the customer table, the orders table, the employee tables, those were all from the same data source. But if the employees tables existed in a separate data source and the orders table existed in, say, PeopleSoft or something totally different, you can bring in those two tables and Crystal will treat them as if they're from the same data source. So it's really no different at all. You would just have multiple connections. You would bring in tables, the relevant tables from each connection, and as long as you can join those tables across the data sources on similar fields, on like fields, it treats it exactly the same. Now there's something to note. If you can't join those data sources together, so for instance, if we're connecting to SAP ECC and I'm bringing in laboratory result information and I want to marry that with, say, production control information that exists in a SQL server, if I have some sort of ID field to link those two tables on, I can join them no problem. But if I can't join them, I can bring in that SQL data in as a sub-report. And sub-reports, just so you know, are its own topic on their own. Basically, that could be its own webinar. What are sub-reports? When to use them? How to use them? But yes, there's definitely ways to coordinate data from different data sources in a single report.
Okay. I think we'll have time for one more question. As Stephanie said, I do want to be mindful of the timer. And again, I apologize if we don't get to your question live here, but we will pass the questions on to Stephanie after. Here's a question. Does Crystal 2011 still support UNV UNX?
Crystal Reports 2011 does support both the legacy universe files, which is UNV, and the new UNX universe files. Note, if you are connecting to the new universe files, the new UNX, I would not use the legacy version of Crystal. I would use the new version of Crystal, which is called Crystal Reports for Enterprise. That was designed to connect to two different data sources. Number one, the new UNX universe files. And we can talk about, what is the difference? What's the difference between UNV and UNX? The UNX universe files can have multiple data sources in a single universe. The old UNV universe files, it was a one-to-one relationship. One data source, one universe. So if you are leveraging the new UNX universe files, meaning you have multiple data sources in a single universe, I would use the new version of Crystal, Crystal Reports for Enterprise, because it was designed to connect directly to that new UNX universe file. And just so you know, the other data source that it was designed to connect to is SAP BEX queries, and that leverages that BEX connectivity. So that's two ways that you can do it. And just note, after Feature Pack 3, the new Crystal Reports for Enterprise can also connect to relational data sources. So before, the reason they released two versions, to kind of give you some background, is that the new version of Crystal, the Crystal Reports for Enterprise, could only connect to the UNX universe files and SAP BEX queries. So what happens if you had SQL, or what happens if you weren't ready to migrate your old universes to the new file? You had to use the legacy version, which is why they released two at the same time. And just so you know, Crystal Reports 2011 content can run alongside Crystal Reports for Enterprise content, no problem. You can have both tools installed on the same server. You can schedule reports side by side on the same platform. There are no issues. So again, to answer your question, if you're using the new UNX universe files, I would suggest using the new enterprise version of Crystal.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie, and thanks to everyone who listened today. I know it's great to have so many people join us when I know we're all busy with our schedules and stuff, so thank you all for attending. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, we are going to have her materials that she had talked about, the slide set that kind of walks you through the demo that she showed, as well as a best practice guide for Crystal Reports. We're going to put those up on the Kingfisher site, and they'll also be up on the Business Objects Experts site later today. And then we also are going to post a recording of this show within a few days on the Business Objects Experts site as well. Stephanie, it was great having you on here, and we're thrilled to have you on the Business Objects Expert Board as well, so I'm sure we'll be working a lot together in the future. It was great to have you here today.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a good afternoon.